Yeah. Yeah.
Now you disable my screen sharing ability. You have disabled my screen share?
You can share.
Let me try. You want me to try?
Yes, please.
Host disable participant screen sharing. This is what is written to me. You have to disable me.
Okay. Let me find you again then. Now that I see your face,
Oh, now I can see the switch to you.
Okay, Akshav.
Oh, okay.
Right. Let me try. Okay, I think now is okay. Now is okay. Switch it. Okay, you can see the presentation?
It's yes.
Okay.
We see your Zoom, so pick the presentation.
Yes, we can. This is the presentation. Okay.
Sababa. All good.
So I will stop share. I will stop share. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Tal, the floor is yours. Oh, wait. You are muted. Unmute yourself, Tal, please.
All right, here.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Can.
Yes.
All right, awesome. So hello, everyone, and welcome now officially to our webinar, Did Israel Win the War Against COVID-19? My name is Tal Heinrich. I'm based in New York City, in Manhattan. I'm a journalist and news anchor, nowadays a contributor for Quick Hits. It's always very good to see so many North American, I would say, friends of Unit 669 of the IDF. And today we're also partnering up with the Israeli consulate to Montreal. So before we begin our discussion, I would like to welcome Mr. David Levy, Israel's Consul General to Montreal, to say some words.
ערב טוב לכל המשתתפים בישראל. Bonjour tout le monde à Montréal. Merci d'être parmi nous aujourd'hui, and shalom to everybody all across Canada and North America. The Consulate of Israel in Montreal is happy to partner today with the CAT 669 Alumni Association. And full disclosure, I am here on one part as consul, also as a member of the association. So for those of you who are not familiar with the unit and the association, a couple of minutes to tell you about it. The Unit 669 was established in 1974. It is one of the four elite units of the IDF. Its primary mission was to rescue airmen that ejected from their airplanes, either behind enemy lines or in the sea, and in order training in combat, in gear, in medical equipment. The mission of the unit was expanded, not also to naval behind enemy training. And once all these capabilities were available, the unit is also providing search and rescue and medical evacuations for civilians. So the unit is operational 24/7, 365 days a year. It provides the solution for rescue and medical evacuation for both the military and for civilian. And it doesn't matter if it's Jews or Arabs or tourists or foreigners. The unit has become Israel's solution of last resort. It's the safety net for all Israelis. The motto of the unit is "Betzara karata ve'achaltecha." But the more I think about it, it personifies the motto of Kol Israel Arevim Ze Lazeh. Everybody in Israel by now knows the name 669, and they know that no matter what happens, no matter where they are, no matter when, the IDF can send 669 and they can rescue people from, if they fell down a well, if they're stuck down a cliff, if their boat is stranded somewhere in the Dead Sea or in the Red Sea. They have medical training, they have the jaws of life. If it's a car crash in a remote area, they can reach anybody, anytime, and rush them to hospital. Now, about 5 years ago, a few graduates, veterans, established the Alumni Association to generate some more work in the spirit of Techonology. First and foremost, to support the people in the unit. They're going through very intensive service. They experience a lot of stress. They get to see some very hard things during their service. Of course, to support the veterans when they are discharged, to help them out in their first steps outside the military through training, through workshops, through mentoring and networking, and activity in the community at large. If it's in volunteering, if it's medical training, and activities like this webinar. So I'm very excited that we're going to have today two very interesting speakers. The first, Professor Moti Gerlitz from Tel Aviv University, who is an alumni and also from my team, who is now conducting breakthrough research on blood tests as part of the COVID-19. And I'm sure everybody here knows Brigadier General Danny Gold, who is the godfather, if you wish, of Iron Dome. But I know that now he's working on very, very interesting projects related to COVID-19. So without further ado, thank you so much. Toda rabah.
All right, thank you so much, David Levy, Israel's Consul General to Montreal. You know, a lot happening this week in terms of politics and public discussion, both in Israel and also here in the United States. In Israel, a lot of discussions going on, a lot of attention to West Bank sovereignty declarations plan. And as you know, here in the United States, of course, the protests and riots is still ongoing in certain parts of the United States. And all of it has taken a lot of our attention. We were somewhat distracted from a very serious enemy for a short period from COVID-19. Here in the US, some states have already started reopening gradually, but in Israel, they're ahead of us, a few weeks ahead, I would say. The country is now in a full mode of the new normal. So today in our conversation, we want to explore what does it really mean? Where is Israel standing in terms of research and development of both treatment, vaccines, tests which are accessible? And to do so, I'm joined by, as David mentioned, two experts who served at Unit 669 of the IDF, Professor Moti Gerlitz from the Tel Aviv University Center for Combating Pandemics, the Clinical Microbiology and Immunology Department, and Dr. Daniel Gold, who is head of Israel's Defense Research and Development Directorate at Israel's Ministry of Defense. Thank you both for joining us. I will just mention that Bar Reuven, the 669 alumni founder and the CAT Association founder, he is also listening today. He is just muted in this conversation. And before we begin the discussion, he would like to say to you that you can also submit your questions, and also please follow the chat because we're going to send some links and you can get engaged, get involved in our conversation. So Professor Gerlitz, to begin with you, if you can just give us a quick update about the coronavirus situation in Israel right now. I know there's been a slight uptick in the number of new cases. What's the latest? What can you tell us?
Hi, thank you. So nice to be here. Good opportunity to meet someone from outside of Israel these days, even if it's on screen. Very shortly, if we get into the points, I think in Israel, the coronavirus or the pandemic started or caught us around the beginning of February, where we started to have the first cases in Israel. One of the first things that Israel decided to do is to close the border, or at least very much close most of the border. They still keep it a little bit from US open for a while, but basically as Israel is kind of although it's not an island, it's kind of an island because of the borders where with all the countries around us, we can basically really control the border very easily. And therefore from February, when they started to have cases in Israel, there was kind of a full lockdown, I would say, in Israel, or almost a full lockdown. And when you talk about pandemic and every infection disease, this is the old treatment even 500 years ago. If you do a lockdown, nothing can really spread. And therefore, Israel got into this 2 months, I will say, period of lockdown. It started very easy and very quickly it got to be very, I will say, severe lockdown where people were able to go 100 meters out of their house. Maybe I was one of the few lucky ones that could travel 1 hour a day instead of 2 hours because the highway was very free. That's a good part of my side. And we basically got to, I would say, a peak in the pandemic in around 4 to 6 weeks, basically in mid March, beginning of April. And when we can actually, this is kind of correlate with every country that the pandemic started. Usually you have this period of 1-2 months that you get to the peak. And again, because of the very strong lockdown, everything started to go down. And basically, if you look on the curve of new cases in the next months, April and May, everything started to go very quickly down. And in the last months, Israel decided to take the next step and really started to open gradually, I will say, open the market again, open new places of work with different still, we call it the purple tag. So you have 30% need to wear masks. You cannot have gathering of many people together. And since the opening, I will say there is this conversation in Israel. Do we get into a second wave? Yes or no, as we have more cases. But this is something that we need to remember that Israel decided also to change the effort of testing. And therefore, in the last months, there is much more testing going on. And therefore, we cannot really say there is a second wave. If you really look into the big numbers, it seems that it's still quiet. And probably the reason we see a little new cases per day is because we basically have a much more tested per day. I would say we are in the beginning of opening the market and with the hand on pulse every day we are looking on the numbers. But right now it's actually seems that it's under control in Israel. There is no huge pandemic, and at least from the hospital view, which is always what is very scary, does the medical will be able to control all the sick people. In Israel, we never got to the point that it was actually even close to the border, and therefore people get the right support, and the death cases, I will say, are very low in Israel compared to definitely North America, New York, and places like this, where it's overwhelmed. So this is where we stand now, and we still, every day it's a new day, and we look on the numbers and decide where to continue. You are muted, Tal. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay. So every time when we speak, we need to unmute ourselves because otherwise, apparently, there is some background noise. I just wanted to tell you that I can see that you're sending me some questions, some notes, but don't send it to me personally since I'm using it on my phone. So you can send it either in the general chat or to Virag. Virag is currently hosting this session, and she will send your questions to me. And let's continue with Dr. Daniel Gold. Danny, your mission is to determine the defense research and development policy for Israel. That's including oversight and execution. What does it mean during the COVID-19 era? I know you have a presentation to share with us. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks for inviting me. It's my pleasure and honor to be here. And I think maybe I give a short presentation. What is my organization doing is day to day, and what have been done during these Corona occasions. So let me just try to share the presentation.
Let's make sure that everyone can see it.
Yes,
there you go.
Now you can see. You can see.
It's loading. Yes.
Okay. So usually day to day, what we are doing, we are the main research and development organization of the Israeli Ministry of Defense. We are doing enhanced advanced scientific and technological know-how and developing systems, including, by the way, we're also in charge of the elite technology personnel for the defense establishment, like Talpiot program and other programs that under me. So we do partially with the commercial world, partially with the defense world. We do a lot of machine learning, AI, big data, connectivity, cyber, space, of course, energy sources, non-kinetic weapon, robotics, and high power laser to intercept rockets, missiles. This is a new one. Of course, we're developing the Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 against ballistic missiles from Iran. Iron Dome is famous. And we also protect commercial airline like El Al from incoming missiles. We are developing also, of course, offensive system. So this is what we do day to day. I will not go further than that. During the crisis, when it started, I think was early March, was attended in the Prime Minister office in some thinking out of the box, and I decided to make an initiative to create Israeli technology center leading by us. We call it Mafat, or Defense Organization in Hebrew, and we took all of our experts, which are scientists, engineers, even combatant, and we create dozens of teams and throw them into the war, which means we went to the hospitals, we went to Ministry of Health, we saw what are the problems, and we try to help in many areas like protection and reuse, areas like remote sensing and diagnostic. I will go for examples later. Of course, the layer of artificial intelligence, and of course the famous ventilators. What we have done, we have taken the defense technology that we know what is going on, whether it's from startups, university, defense company, of course, Israel Defense Forces, A200, C4I units, and we try to deviate it to help the hospitals and the Kopot Cholim and all the health system to work. Give you some example of dozens of teams, tens of running projects at the same time. I can give you some example how the methodology work. We take our methodology. We went to the hospitals, to the ground, to feel what are the problem. We see the doctors, and also with the Ministry of Health. We study the problem, like I say, ventilators. Okay, that's one example. We see there's ventilators is going to be scarce resources. We can buy them. We try to buy them, but in many cases, nobody will sell you because they keep it to themselves. So I decided to create a Israeli-made mass production ventilator capability. We hook some small companies with big defense company, and we enlarge the capability of ventilator production while getting control of all the supply chains, all the elements, and now they are producing. We attach Israeli aircraft industry, Elbit, Rafael, each one to small company, and we have done it. Although, again, it's not in our territory. The same have been done for fast testing and other issue. Again, from our organization, more than 100 people working on this, and outside of my organization, about 1,000 people, again, university, startups, commercial startups, defense company, commercial companies, and the units. We cover a lot of area, whether it's reuse of the equipment, like mask or other things that was a scarce resource, remote monitoring in the hospitals, so the doctor minimize the chances of being infected. You remote sensing for the patient, his pulse, his all the measures, going through fast diagnostic. This is few things that we have done. Part optimize the normal way, the PCR and all of this, optimize it to be faster and multiply it between 2 to 7 times. And part breakthrough from other dimension. We take electronics and all of this means smelling and talking to the headphone technology, take the brain together, and now we are still working with some few breakthrough to try to do a game changer in the testing. I give you an example. A test that can last few hours today. Maybe we can shrink it by using other technology to a few tenths of seconds and do not only 10,000 a day, but 100,000 a day. This is a world game changer. So this is more or less what we have done. We're still, by the way, dealing with this in parallel, of course, with our main objective is to create R&D and create a system for the defense forces. This is in a nutshell what we have done.
All right.
Okay.
So, let's take it from here, because I want to dive deeper into, you know, the research that you, I hope you can hear me. Am I muted again? No. Okay, I want to dive deeper and talk about the research, and especially in regards to vaccine. You know, everyone around the world is talking about development of a potential vaccine right now. Hopes are running high, of course, that we will get a vaccine before the end of this terrible, terrible year. And some vaccine trials are already underway in different stages, very preliminary stages though. My question is, what is the status, the status in Israel right now? Is it likely that a vaccine will come from Israel?
You want to ask the doctor or me, or because
whoever wants to?
I think what, as far as I know, is not the vaccine is not our line of business. Okay, exactly.
All right.
But I know that there are, of course, the biology centers of Israel. They're trying to develop vaccines. They are in, I don't know, mid stages, of course. There are the huge company around the world that also trying to do it. And there are few startups and universities that are trying to do the vaccines in other way. I cannot tell you what is the chances they will finish soon. I don't know. They're still working.
So let's ask you, Professor Moti Gerlitz, where are we? Where is Israel in terms of research on, you know, when it comes to vaccine or even a treatment for coronavirus? Is Israel leading the charge on that front?
So again, I don't know I'm specifically not working on the vaccine. There are several in Israel, as Danny mentioned, that are working on vaccine. But I like to be honest, and like Danny said, when you talk about vaccine, usually the big companies do it. They have the facility, they have the reagent. This is definitely, when you talk about pandemic, there is one thing to make a vaccine in a small lab. There is another thing to make a vaccine to make 500 million of them in the next few months. So although I will say there are many groups in Israel in the academia, as well as Danny mentioned in Ness Ziona, I will call them, that are working on it. As I know the vaccine area, it will come from one of the big companies, as Moderna, that are doing the clinical studies now. They are starting, and other big names in the field that are doing it. So I will. Sometimes you can get lucky in the small lab, which are doing the experiments, but the big names here, it's the big money and the big names. That's the game. So it will come from the big names, unless someone in Israel is really getting lucky in his experiment. You're still muted, Tal. Tal, you are muted.
It happens automatically. I'm not touching it, or Virag is playing with it, so I'm not touching it. Okay, so let's talk about your specific research, your lab at the Tel Aviv University. It has developed an antibody test, which is currently also being tested on IDF soldiers. Talk us through your research, the development, and how is it working right now?
Yeah, so I would say that when everything started, you know, people, you know, ask themselves what they do. Many people just go home because they were in a lockdown, but as immunologists in the medical center, we thought, me and I would say also give big credit to Professor Ariel Munitz, my colleague, we were asking ourselves, as both of us trained in the military, especially me, for coming from 669, it's kind of our goal to think how you can help. And so we were asking ourselves what really Israel needed in that time. And I will say in our goal, we had two things that we were focusing. One is we saw the need for what we call all the RNA PCR testing, which was really underdeveloped in Israel. The lab were not fully from that. So the first thing we did in the medical center in Tel Aviv, we gathered all our students and basically got them basically volunteering to the normal hospitals laboratories so they can play, a big part, because you need the people to work under the clock 24/7. That was the first thing we did. At the same time, we decided to start from scratch with robotic strategy to build our own lab to do the testing in Tel Aviv University. I would say it was a 24/7, 5 days, no sleeping, that from basically a basement, we turn up a full lab that can do up to 3,000 tests a day. At the same time, one of the things is we started to think ahead. And although the problem was in that time how you can test for COVID-19 right now, we were starting to think what is the next move that we need to think about when we want to open. And the next move is to understand what is the spread of COVID-19 and if we have any immunity developed. And for that, we need serological tests. So serological tests are basically tests that it's a very simple question that we ask. Did you as a person develop antibodies that can recognize the virus? And that will tell us two things. One, that you already were exposed to the virus. And second, there is a good potential that you are already immune to the virus. It doesn't mean that you are immune, you need to do further testing, but it gives us the potential. And as a new virus, basically for serological tests, there was 0 serological tests out there. Nobody had a serological test. So we basically set and developed, and Danny was actually part of it. He knows the story behind it because we were talking about it. We basically, in, I would say, 2 to 3 weeks, were able to develop using a very fast technology, very rapid technology, a robust serological test that is basically very quick. We can get result in 1 hour. It's very accurate. It almost have no false negative and positive, so you can really test the population and see what's going on. And at the same time, we also, there is, I would say, a lot of politics how you can move forward with this kind of test. And you have, the Ministry of Health, and then you have the Army. So there are two different, I would say, entities that you can work with. And coming from the Army and knowing the Army from also the health issue, I found that it was very easy for me to get into the right place in the Army, the medical corps, and basically work with them to basically.
Why can you explain maybe why is the military such an important ground for research and testing?
There were two reasons. One is we need to think on who is the important personnel in Israel. So one is, I would say, the personnel that work in the hospital. You really want to know that they are clear to continue working. And the second, it's Israel. We need the Army to continue work regular. We cannot shut down the Army. There is no question about it. Even if everybody will be sick, they will still be in the Army. So taking these two into our account, we went to work with hospitals on one side and with the Army on the other side. And basically together with the medical corps, we basically started to run a big or the biggest serological test that is doing right now in Israel. Now there are other plans, but basically we're already in the middle of doing the first 5,000 basically soldiers, and we do it together with the Army. So the Army really decide which unit you want to clear first, and I will not get into which unit they decided us to test, but basically it's what the Army needs. So we kind of gave our lab as a tool for the Army to use. I would say.
Have you discovered that many soldiers have contracted the virus? Many soldiers have the
So,
antibody?
I will say that I was very, very happy to see that the army, and there are reasons for that. In the army, you can tell the soldier, you know, put a mask, he will put a mask. It's not someone in the street. Or you work with capsules, what we call, so groups together, they stay in groups. And I would say the first unit we tested was a unit that there was a big outbreak there. But the moment they saw the outbreak, they started to work with capsules. They basically took the sick people, put them aside. And we were very, very happy to see that it worked perfectly. Basically, they stopped the spread of the virus in this big base, which is very important. So the base continued to work regular, and there wasn't any spreading except of the people that were actually sick. And now that we are monitoring more and more, I will say, units, Israel, again, because of the big lockdown, we are in a good place. Or it depends if you talk from the herd immunity or the disease. So the disease is not spreading. We are talking about somewhere between the 1 to 2%. Basically, I think it's less than 1. And when you get more into 2, it's the people that do this strain, I would say, are using serological tests that have more false positive. So Israel is very clean, and the army is basically giving you the same picture as you see outside. Of course, with a special attention that over there, when there is an outbreak, it's controlled very, very good. And this is, again, very good for the army to know that they ended it strong, quick, and stop the spread so they can continue work.
And finally, some good news. This is what we need to hear, all of us, regardless of our location right now, Canada, the US, or here in the middle of New York. I have some questions that you guys sent in the chat, and this one is to Dr. Danny Gold. Danny, what is the best thing you have achieved during this crisis on your end, and what are you the proudest of?
There are many, many activities that we have done. I can give you a few examples. Not all of them have been finished. We are still working. It's high risk R&D. One of them, of course, I already mentioned, is the respirators to do production in Israel, not to be dependent for even for now and not for the future. This is one with a massive effort to do it, launch it in a few days, weeks. I think the other end, we have 3 pillars. One pillar is saving lives, is respirators and other things that we do in the hospitals. I won't go into this. The other is getting ready for the big wave, which haven't come for our luck, big wave, and also ensure efficiency and proper safe work of the teams, of the medical teams. And the third group is game changers. In the second group, I'll give you 2 examples. That each hospital in Israel, all around the world, is like a huge plant that works in its own, partially not connected inside. The monitors or all the tools are not connected to a central room that can watch everything. You have to come close to the patient or pretty close to the location. So what we have done within the hospitals, we digitize everything, okay, to a central area. We also digitize everything and connect all the hospital, almost all the hospitals in Israel, to one center, so you can see at the national level, at Israel level, what is going on. You can go down to a patient and this hospital, what is the situation, what is his measure, or to see what is the medical teams, who's sick, who not sick, where is the equipment, so you can prepare yourself to the big way. It is an initiative that normally take 5 years to do it, 7 years to do it, just to coordinate. We do it, we have done it in few weeks and is operational already. So this is one example. The other example is, again, take the measure of the patient for standoff. We took military technology, electro-optical surveillance kit, lasers, and radars. If you know what the radars, we adjust them, and then you can take the measure few meters from the patients, or the next stage you can put it in the entry of malls or airport. So this is another set. Robotics, we put robotics into the hospitals to help the doctors, the medical teams, again, to get near to the patient, to talk through the robots, so to help to bring things and these kind of things. And I think the game changer, I talked about it before, is again, do very fast testing. Very fast testing is a bottleneck, the testing, of course, that we are on the way. I think we also a little bit going to the medical area. Artificial intelligence is a science or machine learning that emulate the brain, more or less, in a nutshell. What we've done, we take the top scientists in this area from all over Israel, universities, Israel Defense Forces, startups. We bring them together and we solve problem by problem using artificial intelligence. One idea was to take a lot of patient data, regular clinical data measures, and then put them into the machine, learn what is going on, and try to predict for the patient what's going to happen in next. Let us say you get a patient which is mild, small symptom, but you analyze the measures by the AI, and then you predict he's going to go to ventilators in 2 weeks, he's going to be in bad situation, so do this and do this. Now we are getting good results so far. Is have to pass through a learning mechanism because you have to have a lot of patients. We took few hospitals to do this research. I think these are the most important things that we have done. And by the way, even going top down, the most important things is we give the research, development, execution capability, and mission orientation to the Ministry of Health. So now we are talking together with the Ministry of Health and the government. For now on, maybe we will create for them, it's not our main mission, create for them some replica of our organization working for the health.
Mm-hmm. I have one extremely interesting and relevant question here in the chat. You know, the World Health Organization has recently said different things about pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic patients and their ability to infect other people with the virus. They say one thing, and now Dr. Fauci in the US says another thing. Is there something, maybe Professor Gerlitz, that you have discovered, or that where do you weigh in on this issue in terms of how contagious this virus is when it comes to asymptomatic infected people?
That's a $1 million question. That really, if someone giving you and says that he knows the answer, is lying. When we look on the disease, what we can see is that we see that we have many people. I will not call them patients because they are not sick. So we need to have this definition. Having a virus doesn't mean that you are sick. If you don't have symptoms, you're not sick by definition. And the problem with this, I would say, population is that usually it's very hard to define it because usually it will be negative in the testing. And because it's negative in the testing, you don't really find it. You can find it later with antibody and say, oh, they actually saw the virus, but they were never positive. So this is something that in time we will understand how many of the population saw the virus without having symptoms. And at least as it seems right now, it seems that by definition, if you are negative for what we call the PCR test, it means that you have a very low viral load. If you have a very low viral load, you are probably not infecting other people. This is, statistic view on the case. It's still not something that we can tell, but we know always that there is some threshold of viral load that need to be, you need to pass it to infect. And I would say that probably the PCR testing is actually testing a viral load that is lower than the infection load. And therefore, I will suspect that people that are usually asymptomatic, negative to the virus by PCR, are not infecting. And it makes sense also when you look on the spread of the virus, although at the beginning we thought that, the ratio is 1 to 10 or whatever, 1 to 20. We see that that's not the number. It's starting very fast because nobody saw the virus, but it's in 1 month, 2 months, almost every country. And we need to kind of, when you think about it, when you go to big countries like US, that's a different story because you have different states. You need to come and focus on one state. You cannot put all USA together because something started in February in New York and in April in Utah. It's not the same. You can look on countries which are smaller and then you usually see that the disease is kind of the same. There is a 2 months going up and then 2 months that it's going down. So when you look now on data from Italy, you can see that in some places you got, to 60, 70% people were infected by antibodies, suggesting that most of them, were infected but asymptomatic, which is actually very good to know that. So the numbers are probably, when you look on the percentage at the end, are maybe less scary than we thought at the beginning.
I have two questions here for Dr. Gold. One is, what has Israel learned about safe reopening that would be beneficial here in the US? That is the first one. Take it away.
Okay, it's a complicated question.
It's hard to compare, of course, size, population-wise.
Yes, is different. I think that probably Professor Galik will answer better than me, but I think also probably there are also age influence and ethnic influence and all of this influence. But I think that the basic, like Professor Galik have said, I mean, we close very soon the airport, of course, and we do partially lockdown, and people obey more or less. And this wearing mask, some wearing mask, and now we are opening once in a while. I think that the thing that is very, very important, in addition to, again, social distancing, wearing mask, and not being in group, all of this, I think what is very important is getting to know what is going on in your country or in your city. Intelligence, either by comprehensive testing or either by comprehensive antibiotic testing, to see what you have to have intelligence to do, to know what to do. Otherwise, you are working in dark. So this is, I think, Israel is improving antibiotic, but also improve the rate of testing, the rate of testing. I think these are the main issue. And then, if you have enough testing, you can spread them all over. You can spread them in a town, or in a neighborhood, or in a hospital, or in schools. You can deviate your testing, because now we have limitation. But if you have no limitation, you can know what to do. You know what to do, where to open, where to close, act near real time.
And the second question to you here is, how is all this effort and resources directed towards the COVID-19 battle affecting defense projects and budgets?
Not at all.
Not at all.
No. We don't. First, again, the attention of the people was deviated, but in parallel, we continue to do our main effort to deal with Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, build our capability, and supporting the IDF, do a lot of operation together. We do it in parallel. People work very hard 24/7, continuously, to do both assets. And in Israel, many of the startups, universities, small companies, big companies, first they work. After that, they discuss about the budget and money. Okay, this is one. and the other thing, that most of the money is coming from Ministry of Health, injected, brought to my organization. We do the work. We don't take the money from the defense to do. We take it from Ministry of Health, or from even sometimes from investors also, because there are startups here with a lot of opportunity. Again, game changer around the world is a lot of billions. So investment for funds, from angels, but also from Ministry of Health. This was the input of the money.
So I'm looking at the chat and I see some questions about the new normal. I want both your thoughts on this and what the new normal is looking like, because Israel is already there, and we here in the U.S. we're still having these questions. Is there really a new normal? Because I keep getting, you know, different answers from different people regarding that.
Again, tell you from my point of view, as you know, we're getting back to new normal. Is depends where in Israel. Some cities and area are more obeying, some less obeying. Depends. I live in Tel Aviv, so they're much more what they want, as you know. And I think now we are feeling in a slight increase of the number of patients. We have to wait to see if it's going up or going down. I think this is a new year. You have to monitor what is going on in the hospitals, in the education center, from geographical and timing point of view, all are in Israel, and do other preemptive activity or other to do in real-time activities. People now feel much more free. Only, at least in Tel Aviv, not much of them wearing masks. Okay, they're going to the beach, they're going to the sea, they're going to restaurants that are open, again, with certain rules. You have to stand in line, 2 meters, limited number in around one table. Of course, the waiters are with masks, but still they are returning to a normal life. The new normal is becoming close and close to normal life.
And when we talk about the new normal, we keep in mind that there is a likelihood of a second wave of outbreak. So, Professor Gerlitz, people here are asking, how is Israel preparing for the next wave in terms of social and behavioral change?
So, I think there are two things. One, we are definitely much more prepared from testing point of view, which is very important again, because then, as I said, you get the intelligence, you can do the right decision. I think one of the problems in the first 2 months that we were just going by, you know, gut feeling and no fact were involved in the decision making. Now with the testing, we are much better on that. And I will also say that now we understand more, at least, you know, and again, there is ethnic, different countries are different, but in Israel at least, we definitely see that we need to protect a very specific population, okay? So if there will be a second wave, I'm very much sure that we will not get into a full lockdown again. It will be a much more specific lockdown, maybe a specific town, maybe, you know, elderly people automatically will be locked down, but I think we will not get again to the same position when we kill our economy and everything is shut down, because killing the economy as you know, it's you can count the lives later. They will come, you will get the check. So I think Israel understand that. I would say that politically we are in a different situation, and that's definitely helping the decision making, you know, to be more, you know, if you have a big government, it's easy to take responsibility. It's not on one person. So I really believe that if there will be a second wave, it will be treated differently. It will be more, I would say, a little bit like I would say Israel army like to do. You know, you go to the place that you need to act, and you act there. You don't, you know, it's not a U.S. army that you have, you know, big guns and machines, and that will be how Israel, I will believe, will handle it in the second wave, if it will come. I'm not sure it will come, but if. And Danny, you have comments on that?
No, but by the way, I haven't mentioned, which is very important. We are a small country again, like you said. Everybody throw themselves to the mission, leave the ego apart, and work together in teams. Everybody was everybody, a lot of volunteers. What we have done, in almost a few weeks after the disease come to Israel, in addition to R&D, what I've done, the Mossad, you know, the Israeli CIA, the army, us, create Ministry of Health, create for the Ministry of Health a command and control center, like in the army, in Shiva Tel HaShomer, few floors, and all the agencies, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Treasures, the law, the procurement agency from the Ministry of Defense, myself, my organization, the Mossad, created like orchestrated team to identify problem, mission, and to solve them. They work 24/7 in shift, like it was an operation. Now it's this machine that give data, give intelligence, give operation, is closed, but now is copied by the Ministry of Health, and they're going to launch it now without the need for Israel Defense Forces and the Mossad, and they're going to launch this command, control, and knowledge center operated by commercial company and Ministry of Health with our help. What is my prediction, if the second wave will come in a big time, we will be, IDF will be in the game again, of course. We have Home Front Command to help the people and help we will come again. But now, as you said, it will be much more, I hope, robust and sustainable.
I want to ask Professor Gerlitz, you're there in Israel, and we know where the country is standing, but when you look towards what's happening in the US and the rallies taking place right now, what concerns you the most? Not as a tourist.
I have my colleagues, which I talk every day, many from California, I would say, not from the East Coast. I think one of the main problems is that each state is kind of by itself. There is no real, one place that organizes everything and control everything. And it's the governors, each one by itself is kind of need to make the decision. And that's the reason I said I don't look on US as one country when it comes to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems that come with that is that because you are one country, you don't stop the flights between the states. So you actually have 52 states that each one is run by itself, but you move the people around with no lockdown. And this is, if each state was locking down its, for 1 month or 2 months, then maybe you will stop the spread in California and in New York, and it will not move around. But because your traffic is basically, it never really stopped, you kind of find yourself in a, every time there's an outbreak, different place, it's not coordinated, one arm doesn't know about the other one. So I think this is the main problem. If you compare it to Europe, which is now kind of a union, right? But instead of US, when they have the pandemic, each country went to itself, lock its border, and then they were able to stop it in each country. But if they were continuing to opening the borders like US, because they are, right, the European Union, they will basically have the same problem as US. But they took it, they went back to all the territories, countries, and each one was doing the lockdown or decided their border. And that's the big difference when you talk about pandemic.
Dr. Daniel Gold, would you like to add something before we wrap up the discussion?
No, I think, again, thank you for your organization and what you're standing for, supporting this special unit in Israel as a whole, special unit. And it was a pleasure to talk here and to meet all of you. Thank you very much.
So, Professor Moti Gerlitz from Tel Aviv University Center for Combating Pandemics, and Dr. Daniel Gold, head of Israel's Defense Research and Development Directorate at Israel's Ministry of Defense. I would like to thank you both for sharing this important information, very positive when it comes to Israel, pretty gloomy predictions when it comes to the United States. So thank you for speaking from your personal experience, your research, your expertise. We really appreciate your time. Before we wrap it up, I would just like to add that I have started volunteering with the CAT Association and the American Friends of the 669 unit of the IDF. I think I started about 7 months ago or something like that. And I have found that this organization is doing incredible things in terms of helping soldiers and also veterans of the unit. So if you would like to contribute or donate, or also just engage in our activity and what we do, please follow the links and follow our website as well. And you can follow us on social media. I know that Virag throughout this discussion has shared many links where you can get more involved and engage with us. And I know that next week we have another webinar coming. It's a very interesting one. We will be joined by a goodwill ambassador of Uganda to Israel. His name is Nir Guest. He is, of course, an 669 veteran as well. And he will talk about army operations, his connections to Pablo Escobar, and about his experience as a secret agent. So you don't want to miss on this one. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Tal Heinrich in New York. You can also keep in touch with me. I'll be very happy. Thank you for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.